I failed at everything else. I think that was a big part of it. No, I was kind of a class clown growing up, and I really enjoyed the feeling of making someone laugh, seeing someone's face morph into the smile and the muscles that are used for smiling and laughing. I remember being like a really little kid, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of this is just society shaping my values, but I wanted girls to like me, and I wanted to be funny. And I think I only achieved one of those. But my dad was really funny, and I loved that he was funny, and it's something that seemed really virtuous and valuable to me. And so it was something I always wanted to do. And a comedy club opened up in the town I was living in, and they had open mic, and I went and I tried it, and then I went back every week, and then eventually people started giving me $100 here and there to do it, and it was about 8 years ago, almost exactly. Actually, what's today? Is today the 8th? Is it? It's 8 years ago today that I did my first open mic. I'm sort of terrified of rejection, so I wanted to really make sure that it was funny before I took it to the stage. So I spent a lot of time writing it and performing it at the time I had a recycling company, and I had people working with me that were like my friends, and so I performed it basically while driving a recycling truck for whatever friend happened to be unfortunate enough to work with me that day. And so after a week, they're all like, "Yeah, dude, it's funny. I've heard it. It's funny. Just do it." And so I feel like I spent a week like really dialing it in and making sure I had it where I wanted it. And then I went up and I did it. And I was supposed to do 4 minutes. I did 7.5. I didn't know how lights worked or anything. I had it all written out. I had to do it all, because it was a callback, and I had watched enough stand-up to kind of know how the mechanics of it worked. And so I had a callback in there and everything. It was something I don't really even use callbacks now very much, but it went really well. And had it not gone well, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to do it again. And I admire people who get up and it doesn't go well and they keep trying, because that's a lot of resilience and determination. It's a scary thing, The first few times I felt like my heart was gonna explode or implode, and so yeah, I'm glad it went well, because I don't know if I'd have been brave enough to try again if it hadn't gone well. I was a huge Chris Rock fan in junior high and high school. I kind of memorized all of his stuff, and then in my 20s, I kind of consumed as much stand-up as I could find, but I've never been real tech savvy, so I was really late to the game with stuff like YouTube, and I really didn't even use the internet until I started my recycling business, which was like in '08. I really didn't have a computer or internet until '08. So I would rent DVDs, I guess VHS at first, and then DVDs from Blockbuster. And if I really liked the stand-up special, I would keep it and pay whatever they charge you, $60 or whatever. So I ended up keeping Doug Stanhope, No Refunds. I ended up keeping Daniel Tosh's first special. I kept 3 or 4 Chris Rock specials. But now I'm still a fan of all those guys. I think as far as famous comedians, people that are really in the limelight and successful right now, I really like Bill Burr. I think a lot of comics do. What I like about him is that he seems to be having so much fun on stage. He's making himself laugh and he's smiling the whole time, and And I like that he walks the line. He walks the line more than I would on some stuff. But I think it's interesting that, this is a guy that's married to an African American woman, and he drives a Prius. He's clearly has strong environmental convictions. So you kind of know that he's actually probably a pretty progressive guy, but he talks all this shit, and the average comedy consumer maybe doesn't know where he stands, and so I think that's interesting. I really there's some up and coming comedians that I think are incredible. There's a girl named Avery Moore in Austin, Texas, that I think is going to be just a freaking superstar. She's awesome. My buddy Anthony Kay out in Northern California, Modesto, is really great. I really love Neil Brennan. I think Neil Brennan is really underrated. I think he's a really great writer. His last special was really incredible. I love Maria Bamford. Gosh, I mean, there's so many, and so many of the comedians that I really like are people that the average comedy fan hasn't heard of because they're not famous yet, and aren't really out there in a big way. I don't consume a lot of TV. As soon as I got out on my own and started having to pay my own bills, cable was one that I felt like I couldn't justify the cost of it. So I haven't really followed sitcoms as much as probably most Americans, and certainly most comedians. I'm really a stand-up comedy connoisseur and sort of a purist with stand-up comedy too. I like one person, a microphone, maybe a stool, a glass of water, that kind of thing. So I haven't watched a whole lot of that stuff. I think Portlandia is pretty funny. Sometimes the SNL sketches are funny, sometimes they're not. I did like The State a lot back in the day. I don't remember it that well, but I remember liking it. And I don't know. I don't even know what's out there right now, to be honest. I feel like when I first saw 40-Year-Old Virgin and Superbad and maybe Wedding Crashers, that sort of generation of films or that time or whatever, I remember thinking, I feel like these are of some other caliber that I haven't seen before. It was some new level of funny to me, especially 40-Year-Old Virgin. And I felt like, man, comedy just took some big step. And I can't really pinpoint why I felt that way, but I felt like those were really exceptionally funny. And I thought it was going to be some sort of next step or renaissance. And then I feel like things kind of teetered out, and it was people just trying to recreate whatever magic they had created, and not a lot has really blown me away since then. But I like dry stuff too. I like Wes Anderson. Eddie Izzard had a 9/11 joke that was just so good because it's just simple and there's no part of it that's not completely necessary for the joke. It's a knock-knock joke. And he says, "Knock knock, who's there? 9/11. 9/11 who? You said you'd never forget." And it's, something I would never have the balls to say on stage, but pretty brilliant. Yeah, that's probably it. Honestly, I would probably choose my friend Stuart Huff, because I've toured with him before, and I know that he's just a good guy. He's easy to get along with, but I just think he's one of the best comedians to ever do it. And he's just a really great writer, and he's a great comedian, but he's also like using his comedy to try and have a positive message and say something that matters, and to make people think about themselves and the way that they treat each other and see the world. And I really admire that. That's the kind of comedy that I want to do, and I'd like to be able to learn from him. And I think that we're a good fit. I mean, I'd love to tour with somebody like Bill Burr, you know. I'd love to tour with Stanhope, although I think I'd probably die or get arrested, or, you know, I'm sort of trying to be a little more of a straight-laced these days. Yeah, those would probably be my top picks. Maybe Bill Burr, Chris Rock, George Carlin, Maria Bamford, because that would just be strange. Is that 4? And Chris Buck from Jacksonville. I really just want to do stand-up comedy. I would do some of that other stuff if I thought that it would lead to more and better stand-up. I would consider writing for a show if I thought it would get me more credits so that I could play better rooms or tour more or whatever. Or I would act on a show if I thought this will make me a bigger name and I can play the best rooms. But really, ultimately, I just want to do stand-up comedy. You know, every comedian kind of has that daydream of like, man, what if I got my own show, or I got a role on a sitcom or whatever. But I think of that and I think, man, if I got a gig on SNL and I did it for 5 years, I'd have to live in New York City for 5 years, which I really don't want to do, you know, unless somebody was paying me so much money that I could live however I wanted to live, you know, because I'm not really a city guy. So I'd want a place that I really like to be in, and I'd want to be able to get out of the city and go into nature, and, you know. So I think I really just want to keep touring, and, you know, I'd like to get some late night credits, and like to get more credits and more notoriety and following so that I can play the A rooms. You know, that's really what I want to do. I'd like to sell out, you know, helium and improvs and punchlines every weekend, and just have crowds that came to see me and pack it out and make a little money and go to the next place. You know, I kind of book my travels around where I want to go. So I come to Florida in the winter. I go into Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and Southern California in the winter. And then I go up into New England and northern states and Pacific Northwest and places like that in the summer, where it's a little milder, hopefully. So I'd like to continue to travel like that and sort of chase the nice weather and not have to spend winters in the snow. And I like my life as it is, you know. I'd like to sort of grow it and, you know, exponentially more of what I already have and do, you know. I've got an album coming out with Stand Up Records, hopefully spring, maybe summer at the latest. It's kind of in the chamber and ready to move through the pipeline. And I'm really excited about that. They've done comedy albums for people like Doug Stanhope and David Cross and Maria Bamford. And I'm going to try real hard this fall to record a special in a theater in Wilmington, where I'm from. It's called Phalion Hall. It seats 546, I believe, is the number. And I feel pretty confident that I can fill it. And I want to record a special there and hopefully get it tight enough and that it looks good enough and my comedy is of the right caliber that we can get it onto, Netflix or Showtime or something. So I think that's kind of my 1 year goal. 5 years from now, I'd very much like to be I'd very much like to be touring the way I already tour and doing all the same things I already do, but I'd like to be headlining A rooms every weekend, and maybe some small theaters. I don't know that I really have a desire to do. I mean, I'm sure it would be really amazing and magical and whatever, but something like Madison Square Garden, where it's a giant venue and screens and all that, some part of me thinks that there's some intimacy lost in that. I like big comedy clubs. Feels like a really good size for a crowd, or maybe small theaters. I've done like the Wilbur Theater in Boston. That was 1,400, and that felt pretty great. But I sometimes think that 10,000 would. I'm sure it would feel amazing to have that many people there supporting you and appreciating you, but I don't know. I don't really desire super stardom. I would just like to be able to do the kind of comedy that I want to do for comedy crowds in the best clubs, and know that most of the people there came to see me specifically, so that I can kind of say and do whatever I want to do and not have to think like, well, I gotta do some dick jokes and fart jokes because I gotta make them laugh. I'd like to compromise less and really just sort of say what I want to say, and have people there that came to hear me, and maybe the 20% that just showed up on a whim will learn something or think differently or have some belief system challenged by the show. My Instagram is Cliff Cash Comedy, and my website is cliffcashcomedy.com, and I'm also on Twitter, Cliff Cash Comedy. Facebook, I think, is also Cliff Cash Comedy. I try to keep it consistent so I'm easy to find. Instagram is kind of my preferred social media. I enjoy seeing nature and also sharing that with people that are following me in hopes that it'll make them go and see more nature and experience some beautiful stuff, and kind of log out and go see the natural world and get out of the office or out of the house or whatever. I'd like for them obviously to have a good time and to laugh, but I like to think that my comedy is also sort of making people think and making them feel something. So maybe people that agree with me, agree with whatever it is that I'm saying, maybe they just think about it in a different way, or maybe people that don't agree with me reconsider what they hold as true or normal or whatever. And I want to try and make people think and feel things without sacrificing the humor that people come to comedy to, in search of. Hey guys, this is Cliff Cash. I'm a nationally touring comedian. I'm all over the place. Probably coming to a town near you, so check me out. Check out my interview with thecutiepie.com. Hope you enjoy it. Later.